Hello.
My name is Katya Puchnik, and I would like to apologize for my behavior. The puppies belonged to my grandmother, and she told me to get rid of them because they were only 3 days old and they were very ill. They had parasites from their mother. I didn't know exactly what to do, so I threw them into a river because it was a short death. I did not want to make them suffer. I am really sorry for this.
Dogs, man's best friend, or at least they should be, and in an ideal world, they would be. But unfortunately, we don't live in an ideal world. There is an ample amount of archaeological evidence which suggests that humans actually began domesticating some particular animals well over 30,000 years ago. And this included wolves, who, over the long, dark eons, would eventually go on to become the cute, cuddly creatures who are so beloved by us to this very day. In a perfect world, of course, every single person on Earth would cherish all of the various wildlife in existence, and even treat them in much the same way as they would their own children. However, as we're also sadly aware, this is just not the case. All acts of violence are inherently unsettling, of course, but they're particularly jarring when they come from the hands of a child. As decent human beings, we all prefer to view children as being intrinsically pure and innocent, but unfortunately, as most of us are aware, there's always a rotten apple in every batch. And therefore, our views on children are nothing more than pure projection, a naive facade that we only wish was true. Aquaphobia. This is a condition that's described as an intense and irrational fear of any and all bodies of water, from streams to rivers to lakes, and finally to oceans. Now, as we all know, humans can develop a phobia of pretty much anything and everything. But what about all the other creatures that share this planet with us? Take dogs, for instance. Do you think that they fear water? I'm sure that some of them do. And what about the universal fear of death? Surely we can all accept that every single living creature in existence fears their own impending demise. I'm sure that most reasonable people the world over are well aware of this fact, of course, but one teenage girl from Bosnia decided to put the concept to the test. Now, despite her absolutely horrifying actions, a part of me, a very small part, actually feels some sympathy towards this young woman. It seems fairly obvious to me that she was rather unfairly placed into quite the difficult situation by her own grandmother and simply did not know what to do. This is no excuse, of course, but it does serve to make the circumstances a little less black and white. However, with all of that being said, the question still remains. Why film this atrocious act at all? Maybe as some kind of macabre proof to her grandmother that she successfully completed the foul deed? Or perhaps she was simply clout chasing, as we've seen so many others do time and time again. That would explain why she'd go on to upload the sickening video to YouTube after the fact. I mean, even a teenager should have known that the only possible reaction to showing people what she'd done to those poor helpless creatures would be utter hatred and abject disgust. And that was certainly the reaction that she received. The outrage wasn't even limited to her country of origin either. In fact, the anger and furor caused by the video spread all over the world. The rage was so great, actually, that even the notorious message board 4chan got involved, tracking down the girl in the video and going so far as to contact the local authorities in a bid to get her arrested. Unfortunately, however, after investigating the situation, the police let Katya go with no charges being filed at all. This infuriated many people aware of the situation even further, of course, but there wasn't really much that they could do about it. In the 44-second clip, Katya, clad in all red in a hooded sweatshirt, removes squealing, terrified puppies from a bucket that she's carrying, and one by one she casually tosses them into the flowing water. Needless to say, this is a difficult clip to watch. Unfortunately, there's no real way to say for sure how many innocent people, how many children viewed this disgusting video before it was finally taken down by YouTube. Now, I'm no hero. I'm not even a good person. I've hurt countless people in my lifetime. Men, women, but animals, I could never do that. And dogs especially. I just don't understand that kind of cruelty. After all, dogs are inherently trusting of us. They love us unconditionally. How can you take that trust and break it into pieces? Shatter it completely? It just boggles the mind. The utter depth of depravity that humans are capable of sinking to never fails to amaze me. Those innocent animals did absolutely nothing to deserve such a horrific death. Katya might have really believed that tossing them into the river would be an easy way to go for them, but she was dead wrong. Drowning is one of the worst, most brutal, most agonizing deaths possible. It's hard to even imagine what those puppies were feeling in their final moments. The whole thing makes me feel sick to my stomach. A reporter at CNET would even go on to describe the video as, quote, errant cruelty delivered with a youthful smile, and I believe that's a pretty apt way of summing it up. Now, the video itself is still widely available on the internet to this very day, but I highly suggest that you don't go looking for it. Just take my word as fact. It's really not worth watching at all. Inevitably, the outrage and desire for revenge, or at least for some kind of justice, quickly spread to the farthest reaches of the internet. Some infuriated people were even calling for Katya's death. Now, while I personally wouldn't go this far, it is hard to condemn people for being violently wrathful after witnessing that horrific video. Unfortunately, it's sadly just a fact of life that there are terrible, evil people out there. People who just love causing pain to others, be it animals or even our fellow humans. Which brings us to our next case.
offender will be gone, and then I am sure you will grieve sore.
This is me from a much simpler, more innocent time. I mean, just look at my hair. What a dork. Unfortunately, life, and everything that comes with it, has stripped me of that sweet, sweet innocence I once had. After all, there's only so much pain, suffering, and death that you could witness before it worms its way into your very soul. In the past, I've had close friends who were murdered, but that isn't what I'm referring to today. No, today I'm talking about all the horrible cases that I've seen and covered, both in my personal life and for this channel. For you. If you're an avid true crime fan like me, then you already know exactly what I mean. Every single true crime fan has those certain cases that will haunt them until the very end of their days. I've heard them say that curiosity killed the cat. I don't know about all that, but it certainly got me into a bit of trouble over the years. For instance, the very first time that I heard of this case, I just couldn't help but to look up the video associated with it. And I still regret that decision to this very day. The horrific images I witnessed playing on my screen are still etched into my brain, and I'm positive that they'll remain there forever. Sometimes, even years later, I still see them whenever I close my eyes. The Hammer Maniacs are a pair of Ukrainian serial killers who were responsible for a grisly string of killings in Dnipropetrovsk in June and July of the year 2007. This case gained extra notoriety due to the fact that the perpetrators filmed videos of some of the murders. The case was also especially shocking to the public due to the relatively young age of the suspects. Viktor Sinenko and Igor Spurnyuk were only 19 years old when they were arrested and charged with 21 murders. And I apologize if I just murdered those names. They'll probably change a bit over the course of this. The first double murder took place late on the night of June 25, 2007. A 33-year-old woman was walking home after reportedly having tea at a friend's apartment. Unfortunately for the victim, though, the two young killers were also out for a walk that night, and one of them had a hammer. As the victim walked past the two murderers, Supranyuk spun around and struck her in the side of the head with a hammer. The two killers then walked off, leaving their victim's body lying on the ground behind them to be discovered by her own mother around 5 a.m. And within just an hour of that initial murder, the two young psychopaths had already attacked their next victim as he slept on a bench not too far from the original murder scene. This victim's head would be completely crushed in with various blunt objects, rendering him completely unrecognizable. This pattern would continue for the next few days, with the murders only growing more brutal and heinous over time. The local authorities were in an absolute panic, with more and more bodies piling up by the day. The victims were seemingly selected at complete random. Many were individuals who were especially vulnerable to attack, including children, the elderly, and people under the influence of alcohol. Many victims had been slain with the use of blunt objects, including hammers and steel bars. Heavy blows were often directed specifically at the faces of the victims. Many victims had also been mutilated and tortured, with some even having their eyes gouged out while they were still alive. One pregnant woman even had her unborn fetus cut from her womb. However, no sexual assault was reported as having taken place upon any victim. Small mercies, I suppose. Finally, on July 23, 2007, the suspects were taken into custody after attempting to steal a cell phone from a local pawn shop. Law enforcement agents were able to track the phone's location when the shop's owner turned it on in order to check its functionality. As authorities began digging into the suspect's past, it came to light that the recent murder spree was merely the final result of long, brutal lives of crime. For instance, while growing up, the boys were known to capture stray dogs and take them into the woods, where they would then be tortured and mutilated to death. When Suprunyak started a job as a local cab driver, the teenagers proceeded to pick up passengers and then rob them. The suspects would go on to be charged in 29 separate incidents, including 21 murders and 8 separate attacks where the victims luckily managed to survive. Their trial began in June of 2008. Thankfully, the prosecution's evidence was quite overwhelming, and this resulted in the pair being sentenced to life in prison, and their accomplice and getaway driver receiving 15 years of hard labor. Despite their success at trial, the prosecution failed to establish a motive behind the killings. However, local media openly speculated that the pair were motivated for a desire of fame and fortune. This would help explain the infamous videos they made. The suspect's cell phones and personal computers contained multiple video recordings of the killings. A video was then subsequently leaked to the internet under the title of 3 Guys, 1 Hammer. This video showed the murder of a 48-year-old man named Sergey. Sergey is seen lying upon his back in a wooded area, and is then struck repeatedly in the face with a hammer that's held inside of a plastic bag. One attacker then proceeds to stab the victim in the eye and abdomen with a screwdriver. Sergey is then struck one final time with a hammer in order to ensure that he was dead. The vicious attack lasts for well over 4 horrible minutes, during which the victim falls in and out of consciousness. One of the perpetrators can even be seen smiling at the camera during the attack, a truly sickening spectacle, one that is unfortunately still widely available on the internet to this day. The 3 Guys, 1 Hammer video is actually the very first real-life gore video that my poor innocent eyes ever witnessed, as I mentioned before, and I'm positive that I'll never forget it.